that's going to be joining me today. Her name is Charey Kind Fox. And if you're from Albuquerque, chances are you know this brilliant woman. She is the owner and founder of the Source Community Healing Oasis. And we're really excited to announce a collaboration that we're going to be working on. And today we're going to talk about the potency and power of constellation work, specifically how it relates to helping people build richer and more enlivened, connected relationships. And so we're going to be talking to Charey about what constellations are and how you can get involved. And we'll also talk a little bit about the event that we're going to be co-hosting. So I want to go ahead and have Charey hop on. Yay!
Hi, hello.
Hello, hello. With the fancy background. Being all fancy here. Welcome. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Thank you for including me.
Yay, yeah. I'm so excited to talk to you and interview because I think you're probably one of my favorite people here in New Mexico.
Thank you.
I just want to tell anyone who pops on later to watch the replay that you have been such an amazing resource for me and such an amazing support, especially in the past year or two or more. And I know so many of my personal friends have also worked with you in your private practice. And we kind of have this like inside joke almost about how like when you have a session, when you go have a Charey session, that like you're going to go deep, like you're not just going to skim the surface. And I just feel like you've been such a support for so many of us. So I just want to thank you for that.
I appreciate, you saying that, and I love working with you, and I've loved working with our community. It's very important to me, and I love my work.
Yeah, I can tell that. Like you're really gifted. So today, I know you do a lot of different things. In your bio that I've listed in our event, you shared that you hold EFT sessions and you do parts work and compassionate education. Communication education. But so today, I really wanted to focus specifically on constellations. This kind of came out. This collaboration came out of this big launch that happened. Netflix released this show called Sex, Love, and Goop. And they actually aired a constellation. I remember I was like binge watching the show because I was so excited for it to come out. And when I got to the 5th episode, spoiler alert, definitely spoiler alert, but I couldn't believe it. They hosted someone who was a constellation therapist, and she had a couple that were, their names were like anyway, it doesn't matter what their names were, but they were both coming to this relationship that was fairly new, and they knew themselves really well. They knew that they had these tendencies in relationships. One of them would tend to, when things got really serious, they would kind of pull back and get really guarded. And then the other person, she would tend to cheat when things would get really serious. And so they were like, we don't want to do it that way this time. We want to do it differently because we really care about each other and we don't want to do that to each other. And so they did the constellation work. And as you know, watching the dynamics play out was really, really potent. And so that kind of inspired me to do some local collaborating with you and offer some workshops that incorporate both the erotic blueprint work and the constellation work. Anyway, I want to kind of turn it over to you and just, how would you even describe constellation work to someone who's never experienced it? This is a challenge.
Well, let me say before I answer that question that I really love the erotic blueprint work too. And I'm glad that you are trained in it, and I'm excited about our collaboration because I do think it all fits together. I think it's not just one thing that heals an individual or a couple or relationships. I think it's everything. And it has to include the body, the erotic, as well as the emotional and empathetic and communication, as well as the cosmic or the ancestral or the trauma. And that's where we get into constellation. I often say that there's a bunch of ghosts between people. So when a couple comes and sits down and they have a conversation with me, I could tell that they're not even talking about the same things. They're wrought with the ghosts of their parents or their ancestors or the suffering from prior relationships or just unknown things. And they're projecting those things on each other. And Constellation has a way of allowing you to see the stories that actually didn't belong to you. And with love, be able to release them.
That is such a beautiful description of what it is. And even just the way you led up to that, it's true that it's the ancestral piece that we're looking for tools, to work with. That makes so much sense. Wow. Yeah, and having experienced it, yeah.
I mean, 40 years ago or so, it got developed. And in the last decade or so, it's been confirmed that through epigenetics, we carry the trauma of our ancestors. So it's, now it's got a more well-rounded kind of scientific base. But we've been doing these kind of things for a long time, and the original creator of it tapped into indigenous people wisdom. So it's really ancient in a way, although it's a therapeutic practice, so it's brand new.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that in. I just want to share that, I've been doing work with people around fertility, and when kind of around the same time the pandemic was going on, I was kind of searching. I was like, because it was very similar. People would come in, and I can tell that what they're talking about isn't even theirs. And I started to look for tools, like how can I help people on a deeper, deeper level connect to these ancestral stories. And I think that's when I picked up It Didn't Start With You, which is a book that's written by a constellation, someone who does constellations. And yeah, he was talking about the epigenetics. And that's really when I became more interested in being in the field more, because I felt like I was already in it with people when I was having a session. I was like experiencing it. Well, would you be willing to share like some, because I think it's like, it's something that's so experiential, it's hard to talk about sometimes. And so, to help people understand and really give people an understanding and experience of what constellations are, can you share any like personal experiences that you've had with this healing modality? If you have any that come to mind.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, a lot of the times people say, well, tell me a little bit about it. And I laugh because I'll say, if I explain it to you, you still won't know what it is until you're in the experience of it. In fact, you might feel afraid or self-conscious, or that you won't be able to do something. And it's so natural. My very first experience of constellation is that I'd had a very abusive childhood. My mother was mentally ill or just rageful. She had some really big issues. And I was at the time looking to have a child, and I was really afraid of the potential of myself to do harm to my own children. So I was experiencing this reluctance. And my sister referred me to the technology of systemic family constellation, and then I found out about something going on in town. And I went to the very first workshop of it, and as soon as I heard a little bit about it, I knew that this was the place for me to take this big kind of broken-hearted issue, this fear that I would be a terrible person and abuse my children. And then the facilitator had me pick people to represent, and I had someone represent my mother and my father and my brother who had passed along, and it was like they were in the same room. And it didn't matter what gender they were. The person who was representing my mother acted just like my mother, and it was so telling. It was so visceral an experience to feel that obsessive anxiety that she kind of ran. And to also see a different experience with my father, the kind of almost trying to protect, trying to protect. And my brother who had passed away, when that person came in and represented, I practically broke down and cried because it was like he was in the room with me. And it was a woman representing him. So it was just like, so it didn't matter, again, the gender. And very soon, the facilitator was just trying to kind of find out where this energy that was creating all of this, almost like a Tasmanian devil of anxiety and viciousness that the one representing my mother had. And so he picked someone to represent my grandfather, and it didn't seem to resolve there. And then he picked someone to represent my great grandfather, and it all of a sudden everything stopped. And the one representing my mother laid down like calmly, and I could see that there was some kind of terrible tragedy between my great grandfather and my grandfather, some kind of vicious or some kind of abuse in the action of the representative, and something left me. It was like I didn't know the story. I didn't even put it together that my grandfather had moved from Maryland to Michigan at 13 years old, and that was weird. Maybe I'd heard a glimpse of it, but it was like, why did he have to get away from his family so badly? And so the part of me had my heart open for that story or that wound. My mother too, she might not have even met her grandfather, but she had her heart open for it. And so there was like a flavor of that volatility or that form of love, even if it's a brutal and cruel form of love, was passed down. And I could feel it almost just like lift. And along with it went this really doubt about a doubt that, oh, are we frozen? Along with, oh, did we freeze? Did I freeze?
No, but we're back.
Okay. Along with it went a doubt about even a doubt that I would ever harm anyone. But the other piece was a doubt that that anyone was, whenever I was in rapport, it wasn't mutual or equal. So it's kind of a subtle thing, but there was a quality of imbalance that just left, like a ghost that left me.
Right.
And to this day, I still remember that constellation. It keeps rewiring my psyche, rewires my brain, so that I know that energy that seems to be free floating, or it could float through me, it doesn't even belong to me. It's not mine.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that story. I think it really paints such a beautiful picture of what's possible with this work. And I just want to say, for anyone who's not experienced it, the magic of it is that the people who represent, they don't know the backstory. They have no idea what the issue is that the person who's having the constellation is trying to resolve. And so it's so magical. I mean, just when you see people acting out these personalities that you know so well, they have absolutely no reference point to. I think that really, yeah, it's a magical process. It's really, really special. And I think that the other thing you spoke to, I think, is the next question I was going to ask you is, how can this type of work help resolve relationship patterns that don't really seem like they're getting anywhere when we're doing therapy or doing the communication work. And I think, even just from your story, you can imagine if someone was carrying that into a relationship where someone wanted to have a child and they didn't want to, but couldn't really communicate why. That could be an example of how someone can resolve something deep that then, I think in our description for our workshop, we're opening pathways, right? We're actually opening the window, right, and letting some air through. I love the analogy of the ghost in the room, you know.
Exactly.
Is there anything
Exactly.
else you can say specifically about how, as a facilitator, you've seen this work help to deepen people's relationship and trust, and even, you know, how it has impacted yours or other people's ability to open to greater joy and pleasure in their life?
Yes, I have countless stories. I've been doing it probably 10 or so years, 10, maybe 11 years, to come to one story. One of the things is that we see or feel a deeper truth. And I've had just individuals feel more free, not have to repeat the hatred, like a woman who in the family line doesn't trust men because of some tragedy that happened generations ago and that kept repeating. For instance, that that a woman could be free to have a relationship with a man if she wants, and not have to hate them or not have to pick the same kind of relationship. I've seen, often I see the struggle that we, not always, but often I see the struggle in relationship as the initial broken struggle between the same gender parent. So a man who's struggling with a relationship situation, and I'll put his father in. I'll put his mother in too, just to see, but I'll see if that dynamic that happened with his father's sense of abandonment or the sense of mistrust or the closeness, whatever it is there in relationship, and I'll just have him note that it's a similar feeling. And it's, again, it's not always, but it's certain patterns appear, and something will lift. It's not out and out therapy. It's not a direct line. It's something that is more like ceremony that changes your perception. It widens your viewpoint. And compassion. In the example of my experience, I suddenly had utter forgiveness for my mother and myself. It was compassion. It was like I could see that my grandfather was easier going than his father, and I could see my mother was actually a better person than my grandfather, and I could see that I was just carrying a flavor of it, and that in moments when I would find myself kind of flying off the handle, I could stop in the middle of a rageful moment and go, oh, I'm doing this for you, Mom. This is how I'm making room for this really sad story that doesn't actually belong to me. And it would shift. So it's like a way that I was able to work it. And I see people working it, and I encourage people to just remember, like a snapshot, the resolution. And the resolution is not always something I initiate. Sometimes the field, which is an exciting thing, that there's this beautiful yearning from our higher self or the field of all being or the morphogenic field. I'm not sure what it is. Sheldrake's morphogenic field, but it starts to answer our deepest wishes. And so the healing is really much larger than what I can do as a facilitator. It's something about tapping in. And part of it is the deep desire within an individual to be free. Again, for me to describe this probably doesn't mean anything to anyone until you're actually in the room. There's one more thing that I'll say about being in a room. we're dealing with some kind of really painful memories. And what happens in a little bit, in an hour or two, or kind of in the representation as in constellations, even with some dark material, is this buoyancy, because people start to feel the shift. They feel the field, that they start to experience upliftment. So before long, people are really feeling beautiful, happy, buoyant. And that's the way to look at hard stuff, is from an extended, light, all living presence, is to kind of feel this buoyancy, this upliftment, and to look at the hard stuff not from within the hard stuff necessarily, feeling it, but not only as it. So it's, again, a hard thing to explain. We all get very happy over time when we work in the field.
Yeah, I've experienced that for sure. There's this other thing that keeps coming to my mind. I've even been like, do I really need to mention this? Because I know we're talking about constellations, but recently I've been doing a lot of inner child work and parts work. And I find that I'm just seeing this correlation between the parts work and then the constellation is like doing parts work with the ancestors, right? So it seems like these, like I remember reading in the book, It Didn't Start With You, that oftentimes the patterns that are most persistent are the stories and traumas that don't get talked about, right? So that for some reason, something happens in a family and that particular relative is not talked about. It's like the thing that's kind of gets exiled, right? And so there's something about, just like when we're doing inner child work, when we can, or even just reflective communication, right? There's these themes where when you just as is what's there, like you said, when you bring truth to what is just showing up and say, oh, I understand, I see you, right? It's not even like something has to change, but just that recognition and that willingness to just witness the truth then leads to that sense of resolution. And it does seem like it kind of trickles down, right? It's not like you have this one constellation and everything changes, but it's almost like you have the awareness then to notice, oh, this is this pattern again. So it's so fascinating to me. It's like we're doing that for the ancestors. We're saying, I see you. I see you.
Yeah.
I think that's what's so beautiful about it.
And I love that you tied in the inner child. I know that Eckhart Tolle talks about the pain body. And in a way, unconsciously we love by taking on the pain of the mass consciousness, the pain of our ancestors, the suffering of our mother or father, or somebody who had a secretly painful experience in our family system, devastating situations, whatnot. And we carry that pain unconsciously, but it is out of love.
Love.
And it's like a body love. It's like a child love. It's like I belong to this family. And then they're like, I hate my family. I can't stand them. I got to get away from them. Well, but it's really usually because of that child merging attachment. Like I like to kind of liken it to if we attach to our mother and our mother's not really available, we attach to what she's attached to. And she might be attached to what she might have attached to her mother or father through the same thing. So it could be generations of the story that is a secret that's so painful or so much loss or something like that. And it's just something that just is the air we breathe, and we become identified with it. And in truth, it isn't us, and nobody wants us to carry it, and it doesn't help our ancestors. In fact, if you think about it from a perspective, your own children, you would never want to carry your suffering, or your mother's suffering, or your father's suffering, or your grandparents, or your great-grandparents' suffering. You would want them to be the alchemized result of all of that learning and be free.
Mm-hmm.
And that is essentially, in my opinion, one of the ultimate goals of Constellation, is to reorder love so that um, so that you're free, so that you get all of the lessons of your ancestors without having to love them by suffering their suffering. And that,
Right.
if you know, that can only make them happier that you're living free, that the next person in the family, after all of the struggle to get you there, to get life to continue, that you are
Mm-hmm.
happy, that you're healthy, you're in great relationship, that you're provided for, that you're satisfied with your work, that you're in good relationship with the earth. Whatever it is, whatever the goal is, that your ancestors want you to be free of their suffering. They don't want to be remembered. In fact, I mean, although it's a glimpse of memory, but they don't really want you to remember them from their hardship. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot more to you than your hardship, and they don't really want to be held. If there's a, in my opinion, I don't think that they. I think what makes us, our whole system, happy and satisfied is having love in a different order.
Yeah, and you also said freedom. I think it does. It comes down to having freedom of choice, right? And not making decisions based on unconscious loyalties that we have. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I love this. I get so like it's really spiritual. I mean, you don't have to be a spiritual person to experience it, but it's almost like it does. It's like it's heart opening. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So, gosh, I feel like we've covered so much. I have this like little question that I have a curiosity about because most of the time constellations happens in a group, right? So you think, okay, you need to have a group of individuals to have a constellation. But recently I was reading a book by Michelle Masters called Money Magic, I think it's called. And she actually has you do this little mini constellation. So I actually took some chairs and I sat across from Money and I got to say, oh, what is mine? And I got to put whatever the relationship that my family had with money in another chair. And so it made me really curious. I found a huge shift just from doing that experience. And I thought it was so enlightening just to see these different perspectives. And then I even sat on the side and like watched the different dynamics. So it was basically like a solo constellation that I did for myself and money and my family. And so I'm curious, we're talking, as we were talking about our collaboration, we don't want people to just come to the event and learn about it from a cerebral place, right? We want people to have an experiential experience. We want people to experience it because only the experience can really, you can only experience it, right? Like you can't understand it from a cognitive place. So I'm curious, once you get to understand the field and once you understand the dynamics, do you feel like this is something you can incorporate in your solo practices? And is that kind of some of what people will be getting coming to the events that we're going to be putting on? I mean, just throwing it out there because I was really fascinated by this idea of using the constellation framework in solo, practice at home. So I hope you understand my question. Does that make sense?
I think I do. I mean, very often I see clients privately and I do some work with them and I include constellation. I find out, where's your mom in the room? Where's your dad? This issue, this health issue, where would that be? And then the chairs, then there's the conversation and then there's a noticing, and all of it can happen in a private session. And along with my belief that it takes everything to heal, I I often encourage people, if they've been working with me privately, to come to a group so that there's something about the greater confirmation of somebody representing mother, father, the issue, the ancestors, the grandmothers, or whatever it is, and watching it before their very eyes without, the people necessarily knowing what or who, and it has that like perfect match flavor. It's a greater confirmation. And then likewise the opposite, like somebody comes to finds themselves coming to the constellation group, they do a constellation, and then I encourage them to do a little work privately so that we could do more mental stuff, more trauma stuff.
Right, almost like integrating the self into this new sort of framework that's emerged.
Because our mind sometimes needs to understand or has questions. Yeah, so there's different ways of bringing ourselves further out in that.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. Okay, cool. So thank you so much. There's just so much in this work that I adore and I love. And so I just want to take a moment and just announce that, yeah, we're doing this event on January 22nd. And it's going to be kind of a little introduction, right, to both constellation work and erotic blueprint work. And what I know we talked about, we really want people to have an experience of the constellation work. What is your vision? Like, what would you like to share about that, about the upcoming collaboration that we're going to be doing?
Well, I believe that love and pleasure, love and fulfillment, love and deep satisfaction go hand in hand. And if we can rearrange our unconscious love and make a conscious love, become free to be ourselves, then we can sink deeper into our own life and our own body and our own joy and get to know our own impulses, our own attractions. And it's, in my opinion, it opens up the possibility of really being here, a little piece of heaven on earth. It's like your right, your essential right to be cherished, to be loved, to be satisfied. So I think that they're in perfect harmony, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you think? What is it?
Yeah. I do. So I think, I think part of doing the erotic blueprint work is, there's one thing, it's kind of like reading a book, right? You can read a self-help book and you're going to get it mentally, right? You're going to get it like cognitively, but to really embody the work and to use the tools and watch yourself through that process, it has to be an embodied practice, right? And I think that it's so easy to just kind of speed through the practice sometimes without really stopping and slowing down and observing ourselves through what we're going through. And so when I'm working with someone through the framework, through the modules, we get to pause at every step of the way and say, well, how was this for you? Like, what did it bring up? Because oftentimes when we begin to stretch and go into these greater, I wouldn't even say like greater visions for what our pleasure, what our love life, what our relationships can look like, there's a little bit of a stretching, right? Like beyond what we even think is possible. And maybe we're hitting up from some of those, hitting against some of those ancestral walls. Maybe we're hitting up some of those, personal walls from childhood, right? Like the glass ceiling. And so having someone to help hold space for that process of titration, like taking in a little bit and then pausing to say, what's there, what's coming up. And so I kind of, it's almost like, I love how you're saying, like, we're calling in all the parts, right? And we're allowing that process to go even deeper, right? So we're not leaving any little stone unturned, that's kind of what I see, so that the benefits of what we're learning in the erotic blueprint work of like, how we want to be touched, how to even touch, and how to really listen can be even deeper, right? We don't just learn it and then go on with our lives, but it becomes a part of our embodied practice. So that's kind of that's my vision for it, is to, that, kind of give that integration piece, integrating that
You,
into the body mind.
when you speak about
Yeah.
that, I
Yeah.
feel coaxed into like that I matter. That I feel that mattering.
Mhm.
That each person really like. Very often we have an idea of how to be a sexual person or to be a partner, and they live in our head and it's not in our body. And then we maybe go through
Mhm.
motions, and we go through the motions again that could be our mothers or our grandparents or you know whatever. And also, or our ideas or our media's ideas, instead of like what's intimate for me. So when you
Mhm.
speak, I just feel that sense of I'm going to be held in mattering. I matter. My
Mhm.
my urges, my desires, my sensations matter.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. And it's true with the erotic framework. I think the erotic blueprint framework that, of course, comes from Jaya, it's not just techniques and tools. That's really what it is. It's not. I would say, like, sometimes we say it's a language. It's like an erotic language. But even when we speak, right, each one of us has a different way of speaking, different intonations, different words that we like to use. So it really is. It really is not just about what do I want, and yes, it matters, but like now, right? Because that might be different from what I needed yesterday, and it might be different from what I need tomorrow. It might be different from what I needed with this one partner. And now, so it really it is. It's a way of really honoring, like, we have a practice that we call pleasure first. And it's like, how can I just bring this concept of, like, how can I make this moment right here really count? Like, really bring all of my attention, all of my love into this moment. So I think that's beautiful what you said, that it makes you feel like you matter, because that's what I think it comes down to. And especially in, like, pleasure and communication, so many of us are wired to just sidestep what's really being communicated from our nervous system and from our body. So yeah, it's like stopping, just like you would stop and say, what does this ancestor need? What does this part need? What am I needing right now in this moment, so that I can say yes to this greater pleasure, so that I can say yes to this beautiful experience? Or even maybe I need to say no, right? Sometimes it's about saying no. That's my yes, right? Yeah. So
I can
I think it's
imagine
pretty, yeah.
I can imagine that people that might be listening that haven't had permission or haven't given themselves the permission to be present with their desires in each moment could be really touched by this right now. And I know I have been touched. I checked out the erotic blueprint. I finally understood or seen,
Mhm.
and I've only dabbled, so I'm really looking forward to more work in that as well.
Yeah, thank you for bringing
It's
that
made me
in.
weep.
I
My
know,
God,
it's special. I mean, yeah, if people out there haven't seen Sex, Love, and Goop, I love that I can point people to that, because it's kind of like the constellations, where it's one thing to read about it, but it's another thing to watch it happening. And it'll make you cry. Like, the first couple in the show, like, they made me cry. It was really beautiful, watching their transformation. And, it's really interesting. The first couple that, the guy says, "Oh, she's so like vanilla, or like a prude. She doesn't really like a lot of, like, sexual things." But by the end of it, they're like, "No, that's not it. You were just not touching me right, or like, you just weren't. I wasn't even hearing me." So it's just so beautiful. So I invite people to watch that show. That's definitely something that I think would inspire people. And then I would love to just do a little shout out. I started, because, it's like Facebook is so big, and I really wanted to, like, concentrate and not just constantly be posting about this stuff. So I started a little group. So I'm inviting people. I'll, like, have the links below if you want to specifically stay in contact about this kind of stuff. then I have a little group on Facebook. It's called Erotic Embodiment, which is like what I like to call it. But also I wanted to just make sure people knew how to reach out to you if they're interested in one-on-one work or constellation work. I know you're doing a constellation tonight. I'm going to come.
Yeah.
And you do that most Thursdays at 7 o'clock.
Most Thursdays. Yes, 7 to 9.
Yeah.
And if they reach out to me, RSVP, it's possible, but if not, it's great. It's good to RSVP, then I know how many people are coming.
Great. So I'll share that info, below on the comments. And yeah, and also if people want to do solo work, they can reach out to you via email or phone. I guess the only other thing I want to say is that for our event on the 22nd, we're actually building up to doing like a deeper workshop. We wanted to give everyone just a little bit of an intro and a taste. And the other thing I want to say about it, actually, we haven't even talked about this, but I think we can probably also do like a live version. Like I don't know. I think we're going to talk about potentially streaming it so that it could be available for people who aren't in Albuquerque or who might be interested in dropping in but can't come for some reason that day. So I'll make a bigger announcement to let people know if that is in fact going to happen. But I've been
or at least a portion of it we could stream live so that people can have it in their own homes.
Yeah.
And I think that the one we do on the 22nd, I think come away with a huge shift, and you'll want more, and we'll be able to provide you more.
Yes, I love that. My heart just went, oh. I'm a shapeshifter, so I'm like, more.
Yeah.
Just a little taste, the energetics. Like, just a little taste. Okay, good. The other thing I quickly want to say, oh gosh, did I forget? Oh yeah, your EFT group. Charey has a Monday evenings EFT, tapping and gratitude. I got to go last week and it was so helpful. So I'm just going to post all those little links down below. Thank you so much. I'm really excited. Like right now, I just feel like my body is buzzing with like heat and excitement for the possibilities. So looking forward to working with you and offering this beautiful, much needed work to our community and beyond.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much. Thanks for collaborating with me. And I'm delighted to have this experience with you. And I also feel so in my heart and so in this field of possibilities. So yes, I'm looking forward to it. And I know the right people are going to come.
Yay.
If you feel that it's right for you, don't hesitate, because we're drawing you and you're drawing us.
Come. Thank you, Charey. I'll see you later.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.